Does Kyle Shanahan have too much on his plate? And here's what's on his plate, Vish. Head coach of the team and the play caller on offense and the chief personnel decision maker in the front office. I'm not sure. Does any other coach have all three responsibilities full on the way Kyle does?
No.
Are you
Nobody.
sure?
Yeah, I
Not
can't think of
Belichick?
anybody.
No, Belichick doesn't call plays, right? He delegates that, even though he's overseeing on defense. And
Right.
then Sean Payton doesn't have final personnel.
They have Mickey Loomis and Jeff Ireland.
Right. And then Eric Bieniemy calls plays on the Chiefs,
And
right?
Brett
And
Veach
they
is
have
a
a
strong
GM.
GM.
Well, I guess you got a good point. So Kyle Shanahan is basically the most powerful head coach in the NFL.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I don't think I think it goes beyond that, right? You look at the fact that he's only kept defensive coordinators who have less experience than him. Basically, to me, the inference I draw from that, it's not that these aren't talented coaches, right? Robert Saleh was obviously an excellent coach, and the jury's still out on how much DeMeco Ryans grows. But to me, there's positive signs where in 2 or 3 years he could be one of the better defensive coordinators in the NFL and take the same career track that Saleh took. But the other difference is like the other examples we bring up of head coach play callers, right? Like Sean McVay has a former head coach as his defensive coordinator. Raheem Morris at 32 was the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yep.
He's got a lot of pedigree, and he's been around in a lot of different places. DeMeco Ryans' only experiences with the 49ers. Raheem Morris worked for Tampa Bay. He's worked for Washington. He's worked for Atlanta. He's worked in a few different places.
Cliff Kingsbury.
Cliff Kingsbury, Vance Joseph, right? Strong general man, strong defensive coordinator. Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo is as experienced as anybody. And before that, he had Bob Sutton, who's also been around for a minute. And Steve Spagnuolo was also the head coach of the Rams.
Yes, thank you.
And then, of course, even Sean Payton, he has Dennis Allen, and there are a lot of the changes they've made. Right, he had trouble maintaining a defensive coordinator because he was hiring guys like Rob Ryan and all of that. And then finally, he landed gold with Dennis Allen, who former head coach of the Raiders, and he's done a terrific job. And their defense is really what's driving their team. And I just feel like to me, this isn't an excuse for Kyle Shanahan because these are self-inflicted errors.
That's what he wanted.
But I think these are part and parcel of why, you have mistakes, because there's just only so much one man can do.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that when you step back and realize he's the most powerful head coach in the NFL, obviously he shouldn't be. Hasn't earned that. Like, if no one should be more powerful than Bill Belichick at this point. Like, he should be the limit because he's the most accomplished and most experienced, and he's earned it. Giving him this much was really another York mistake. Let's just give it's what they do. They gave the franchise to their 27-year-old son. Why not give the entire team to a 39-year-old head coach who showed promise? I mean, that's what they did.
And to me, it felt like something, if you go look at the way Kyle Shanahan has talked about the head coaching hire, he talked about it a little on the McVay podcast and all that. It felt like to me like Shanahan didn't want anybody else to screw it up for it. So he didn't want a strong GM. He wanted to have full autonomy of everything. And I think he's getting impaled by his own sword there.
Right.
Because
if anyone screwed up, it would be him. And what he's doing is screwing up a lot because there's too much.
Right.
It's too much. Yeah. So I do think, but one more thing. His dad had the same amount of power eventually in Denver. Now, I think originally he had Gary Kubiak calling plays. I mean, he did have stuff, but he eventually took over Denver and was like the emperor of the Broncos to his detriment. It was not a good thing. And I think what we learned when I was in high school and when you were young was that coaches really shouldn't have all the power. They used to say, well, if I'm going to cook the dinner, you got to let me buy the groceries too. No, you just focus on cooking the dinner and let someone who's an expert buying the groceries do that. Just saying.
It eventually happens with every organization, right? The head coach wins a Super Bowl early the way Mike Shanahan did, and he eventually gets more and more and more power, and it ultimately leads to his downfall after many years. I feel like Mike Holmgren in Seattle originally started off great, even though he had the full power, but eventually it fell apart in a sense because there's only it's a grinding job if you're just a position coach. To be the
Bill
head
Walsh
coach,
always had John McVay. Always had John McVay. So Bill Walsh was, making decisions too, but he had someone else in the front office who was a Hall of Famer as well.
Yeah, to me, it's tough. I can't give him sympathy because again, he had the opportunity to hire a defensive coordinator like a Raheem Morris this offseason, who he's worked with and is familiar with for
I
many
mean, you
years.
brought this up. If he were a more faithful viewer of the show, he would have done it because you suggested this.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, and then you see, Rob Guerrera and Levin Black, they did a phenomenal job interviewing Kyle Juszczyk, and he mentions that Kyle Shanahan is involved in calling some defensive play calls too. And I don't know when he gets involved in calling some defensive play calls because a lot of the times he says he misses certain things when the defense is on the field because he's not watching, right? He missed Josh Norman's penalty. He had no clue what happened. He challenged something that was unchallengeable, which is still, in my opinion, butt fumble, backwards pass on Sunday Night Football level of pathetic. So I don't know when he gets time to fit that in, but I think it's just too much. And you can see on his body, you can see the physical wear and tear this job is taking on him.
and again, he has all this stuff on his plate, and he lost his pass game coordinator, Mike LaFleur, lost his offensive line coach, lost his defensive coordinator. So you could argue that maybe there's more on his plate this year than ever before. And the results haven't been good.